whatever. Now, I need you every third Friday to stop what you're doing and come out and join the Mental Dialogue family, y'all. It is an absolutely amazing experience. It is hosted by this brother that I have on the video. He don't pay me. As a matter of fact, I pay him to be a member because that's how much I care about what we're doing. I love telling people that it is not a conversation amongst like-minded people. It is folks of all walks of life. The only thing that we have in common is that we're Black. But aside from that, we have politicians, we have CEOs, we have therapists, we have entrepreneurs, we have people who are at the height of their career, we have people who are at the start of whatever ventures they're in, we have lawyers, we have Republicans, we have Democrats, we have Muslims, we have Christians, we have non-denominational. Everybody is a part of this community.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
That's intentional.
Yes.
Very
yes.
intentional.
And so it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. And it is intentional. And so if you are in Atlanta, take the time. We just had one on Friday. Next month, every third Friday is at Urban Grind. Sometimes the venue changes, but nevertheless, it's what got us to this conversation right here. And this is why Montoya and I decided to hop on. I had the privilege of participating in his Soapbox series that he does every couple months with Mental Dialogue. This one specifically was catered to women. It was ladies' night. And so we got to get on our soapbox, so to speak, and discuss the things that mean something to us, that we're passionate about. And so my conversation was Wakanda, and with a different spin. It was that I don't want Wakanda no more. What women, Black women are over Wakanda because we have always lived in Wakanda. And what that means to me is that Wakanda is a place where a Black superhero is protected by all these Black women, that they're on the front lines ready to put their lives on the line for him so that he can live in his greatness and live in his purpose, that any technological advances he needs to continue to live in his purpose, he looks at his sisters to do that. When he goes to war, battle man to man, and he needs his powers restored, he gets to lay in a bed of flowers and they're restored to him by a woman. And it's just ongoing. And even what I think about Montoya that I didn't touch on that day was, at one point in the movie, his sister says that she wants to be Black Panther. And everybody looks like this is something that's just unreal and not even possible. In my opinion, it was solely because she was a woman, because at the end of the day, all of the resources and tools that they had in Wakanda, they looked to her to make them better. They were always looking to her to improve them. It was her technology that allowed him to be successful in his final battle, that helped them take their resources to other nations to empower them. But when she said that she wanted to step up to fight to be Black Panther, it was a joke. And that's America. That is the America that I live as a Black woman, that anytime Black women want to be in a position of power, anytime we want to stand in our greatness, live out our purpose, it becomes, oh, well, let's just make sure the whole community has it. And then if the community good, you'll be good. But every time something has happened for the community, the Black woman has still suffered. So that's my take on it. But I'm sure you have a difference of opinion. So we're going to let Black Socrates introduce himself and say his piece. And I'm gonna sip my wine while you say what you got to say.
No, it's all good. Again, yeah, my name is Montoya Smith, a.k.a. Black Socrates. Thank you for the glowing review of Mental Dialogue. Thank you so much for that, Queen. You represent it. As I said on the show, we did a show on this same thing. So we had an amazing show this past Saturday. And so you won it like you said you would. So I think your soapbox is super dynamic. And then clearly there are some differences of opinion, and that's what we're doing now. So what I would say, for me, when I listen to you, in a sense, say when a woman, in a sense, wants to step up and have a certain position or whatever, my nuance, and I always talk about nuance. Like, I like to have dialogue in the framework of nuance, because I'm not completely disagreeing with you. Like, let me start out there. But the nuance, when I hear the, specifically the example you're using, I didn't quite recall the young sister saying she wanted to be Black Panther, but makes sense. Not surprised at the reaction, so I take that for what it is, even though I didn't recall it. To a certain extent, in the sense of her stepping up. Now, me as a man, what I'm naturally thinking, that example specifically, I'm thinking to myself in the sense that in us working together, I think that I still believe that there are relatively some natural roles. And so I cannot fathom that I'm not the one, in a sense, protecting her in that sense. So for her to say she would want to do it, men, in my opinion, from the standpoint of if we have to be out there, quote unquote, fighting, then in a sense, we would prefer that to happen. Now, the reality, which I'll give you credit for, the reality over the last 30, 40 years is sisters have really been left no choice but to be on the front lines based on what's happened with the dynamics of our community. And so by having no choice, and as powerful as our queens are, many of you have stepped up what we would, in a sense, as you hear men say this these days, in kind of in our place. Now, I think your argument is it necessarily shouldn't have to be a man or a woman. I may be wrong in how I'm receiving what you're saying, but y'all, in a sense, have had to. Like when you mentioned a little earlier, even on the other video, this concept of strong woman, in a sense, being a negative thing. I'll say this and let you talk. But the negativity that's kind of come associated with it has been, in my opinion, unfortunately, because us as men, to a certain extent, for our community, have not been there in certain regards. There are men who are, and men who do step up. They always get offended when the woman says what I just said. They're probably, if they're listening now, they're probably saying, "Oh Lord, he one of them guys saying men ain't step up." So they, in a sense, take it very personal to themselves. But generally speaking, when we look at our community, if we're honest about where we say we want our community to go, some of it's systematic, some of it's by choice. But either way, regardless of why, not placing blame, but regardless of why, if we're honest about the fact that men, generally speaking, have left a lot for you to do, and y'all have done it. So when you make that argument that, we out here and then we got to come home and take care of you, I don't disagree with that. My preference, and here's where I would let you jump in, my preference when it comes to certain things, like the example of you saying her wanting to be Black Panther, there are certain places where, in my mind, to protect you as my queen, as my sister, I don't even want you on the front lines. I want to take that on because I think that's, quote unquote, my position. Now, like I said, but with the idea that we have not done it, you've had to do it for a long time. But if we kind of restore ourselves where we should be, there are some things we should be able to say, we're not at that place. But in shooting for that, that's where I would differ, in the sense that there are certain things we would like to handle, and there are men that are doing it. I think those are the type of men that give you the most backlash, but I don't think that all men will admit that it's not enough of us. I'm willing to admit that.
So I think what's missing is there's a perception that women saying we want to live in our own greatness, we want to be in positions of power, that we want to receive the same rights as men, that we want to get paid the same wages as men, that we want to earn the same capital as men, somehow that translates, and not saying you, I'm just saying in general, somehow that translates into people thinking that women want to be men, or they want to take over the role of a man. And that has absolutely nothing to do with it. It is only, and has always, for me, simply been about me living in my greatness without judgment. And so I'll give some examples. If there, I've known men who have decided to take jobs overseas to earn a good living so they can send it home to their families, right? I've seen cases where men who were in co-parenting situations, and they would get their children for the weekend, and they would get all the praise in the world for keeping their kids for the weekend. But if the woman somehow says, well, I'm going to take off for a year and I'm going to pursue my career or my dreams, and I'm going to be the provider and leave and take this job, she's now a bad mom. People think it's okay, or she should be prepared for her husband cheating on her, and like all of this just comes with the territory. And so for me, I want men to stop making it about them, because it's not. It's not about the Black man as much as it is simply about them supporting the dreams, the desires, the purpose, and the power of the Black woman, because at the end of the day, he would not be here without she, period. So if that's the case, then allow us to live in our greatness. It blows my mind. It's something as simple, and I know America is a whole nother ballgame, but it blows my mind that we can't even get a woman as president. And whenever that happens, it's sure to probably be a white woman first, because the Black woman always falls at the end of the totem pole. And just like at the event when the gentleman said, well, why does it have to be about the Black woman? Why can't it just be about the community? Why can't it be about us? Because it has always been a us thing. And until women step back and say, we're not going to judge each other, that it's not a selfish thing for us to focus on just women empowerment, that it doesn't mean that we don't love men, then we're going to be stuck. We're definitely going to be stuck in this place. Samantha says that I think it's more so that the role that the woman plays in the family. Tell me what you mean, Samantha, because I think that's another piece, and we can go back and forth about that as well, Montoya, because these roles we talked about how you can Google how to be a good woman to a man, how to get a husband, all these things, all these topics about what a woman can do to get a man. And you're going to find hundreds, if not thousands, of books and articles about it. But if you look up how to be a good man to a woman, it's like crickets. I think I found one video on YouTube, this really weird guy that I didn't want to watch. But there's not a conversation about that. So when are we going to demand what our expectations and our standards are as women? And when are men going to say, dog, that we do need to put them first? I know that was a lot.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna jump on to go back to the us part first. No, that was fine. I think I can remember most of it. But we can go back and forth before we get through all of it. Mm-hmm. So I want to go back to the us statement, because that brother did say, and if you may recall, brother opened with, he's all for women's empowerment. He actually went as far as to say that he glad to see sisters stepping up, because to a certain extent, he said men hadn't stepped up. So he opened with that, and then he says, and he kind of said, in today's environment, when can it be an us thing? And I know where that sentiment was coming from, because we unfortunately, how often are we seemingly having these back and forths that seem to be riding between gender lines in this discussion. Like, this is becoming a continuous and growing thing. The one thing that I will offer to you, in your comeback, I think I ended up seeing another video where somebody loved your comeback to him, which is, I think you said something to the effect of, us becomes about you, or something to the effect. You can say it real quick.
I said it's always us. It's always us when it's no longer about you.
Yeah, exactly. Remember? So yeah. So anyway, I would like to share with you, Queen, on everything, that when a man like that brother right there and myself, or again, it's not making it about me, but I do know for a fact that when men are literally saying us, we literally have you in mind, and that us is not about us personally. Like this back and forth, what men are kind of saying is, if we make it about us, then some of the separation that we're talking about, I personally think we would recognize that that separation doesn't even exist within our own community. You know, we went back and forth, you know, for example, about the equal pay on the show or whatever, you mentioned it, you know, briefly here. And so, you know, again, I don't want to make it relative to me, but I will say I would be blown away by a black man, I would say. I would be blown away by a black man who, in his mind, would subconsciously pay a sister less for the same job. Like, I don't think that, I generally think, I definitely could be wrong, but I generally think that black men don't have a concept of this because we've always had to do it together.
I disagree. I don't think that it's with, I don't think, Nina said, what's the topic? So the topic, quickly, Nina, is essentially the black woman feeling like, or me speaking on behalf of the black woman in an event, feeling like we've always had to put our passions, desires, and dreams to the side for the betterment of the black man, our community, so on and so forth, and that there's not enough men out here fighting on the front lines to ensure that we have equal pay, that we can live out our dreams, all that fun stuff. And thank you for joining in. And if you guys are in here and you're digging what we're, you know, dishing out, then by all means, please share the video, invite some friends in, because we genuinely, this is not just a me and Montoya thing. It is really to create a conversation within our community so that we understand what it is that each of us need from one another so we can move forward. So what I would say, Montoya, is I don't think it's a conscious effort. I don't think that black men are intentionally not paying black women the same amount that they deserve. But like we talked about on the show, I listened to Kevin Hart on The Breakfast Club, and I don't know if you guys went back and watched the entire interview.
I definitely want to jump in.
Did you see? Right. Yes. So did you see when they asked him, was Tiffany Haddish being paid fairly? He quickly redirected that conversation, and again, he made the conversation, it became a we conversation. He said, I'm giving her an opportunity. And even she stepped back and she looked like, yeah, am I being paid fairly? Because she stepped back and she said, he said that I'm giving her opportunity. I'm taking her with me on this journey. I'm empowering her. And he flipped it and he redirected the conversation to be about his beef with Cat Williams and how us as a black people, yes, he did. Now, y'all go back and watch that interview with The Breakfast Club with Tiffany Haddish and Kevin.
That you might be missing, but go ahead and finish. Go ahead and finish.
And my point was, he got on his soapbox, so to speak, and he made it about us as a people when the conversation was about what Monique experienced is black women being underpaid in Hollywood. And he did not want to address that directly. He wanted to address black people dealing with black people. And at some point, we have to have the conversation about black women's rights. Because even when we're fighting for the rights of all women,
he actually said we need to have the conversation. Like, I think you missed.
But he didn't have the conversation. He said we need to have it, but he didn't have it.
Well, no, he did. He did. What just a real quick nuance or whatever. Okay. And again, I watched it because I was, just being fair. So now what happened was Envy kind of took it off track because I think they were going to go directly down that line. So, because you're right, they asked that question or whatever, and he looked kind of funny, and she looked smug too. And the short version, instead of making it long, the short version was she kind of said, like, am I getting paid? Like you said, she was giving that little funny look. And what she ended up saying was, well, he is the producer, because they were trying to playfully say who's getting paid the most and who's the headline of this particular movie. And so she was like, well, he is the producer. And then Envy kind of went funny and said, well, she the biggest star in this movie. And he was kind of messing with Kev. And Kev was saying, well, if that was true, I would highlight that. But he's basically was saying he was the headliner. And then he just says, and he says the thing that people are not considering. He said this on this very topic. He says what we're not considering is your draw. He says that's what goes into the business decision every time. When you know, and he did go on the Cat Williams thing. He said it's not about ticket sales; it's just about your draw. And he says that's part of the decision in how we're paying everyone. It's just what can you bring back if I pay out. So he just said that people forget that part of the decision. Like when they just say, "Are you being paid the same?" They're not considering how the pay is coming about in the first place. That's what I saw him say. And he goes, "We need to have the conversation." And I think envy, being funny, they all got to laughing is why they went in the red. That's what I saw. I just say, I felt like he definitely was open to the conversation, but because they redirect, envy to me is the one who redirected. He didn't redirect it. He's, you know, whatever. And she said he's the producer. So in that situation, it makes sense in that particular situation because he's acting and producing. But she looked at him kind of funny, like, you know,
yes, she did.
Yeah, so I'm giving you that, but I'm just saying you got to add that other context. Even she admitted he's producing and acting, and it was his.
Absolutely.
So,
and listen, I don't compare apples to oranges.
Yeah, right.
So I wasn't saying that she deserved the same pay rate as him. My point was, because I've had this conversation when it was dealing with Blackish and Tracy Ellis Ross saying that she wanted to make the same amount as her co-host, but he's an executive producer. And so I don't think that's right. It should be apples to apples. Nina the Queen, she says, I don't think Black women are at the bottom of anything. I sat next to an Asian American woman who said to me, what American Asian woman that is at the status of Oprah, Beyonce, or Michelle Obama? I had to think about it, and she was right. She said, despite all the adversities we face, Black women still overcome, and all three of those have good men in their corner. You're right, but what I will say, and Montoya, I'm gonna let you jump in on this one too. What I would say to that is, that's not comparing apples to apples, simply because, for a number of different reasons, but for one, Asian American women have not been here as long as African American women have. So I don't think we can compare our success. We've had to fight for much longer to get to where we are, and we're still not given all the positions that we deserve. I think that every woman, and don't get me wrong, because every woman has her fight, because in the grand scheme of it, yes, women are not placed in the same values, with the same value as men are. And that's not about, you know, the nurturing side of anything. It's just that we're just not given the same opportunities. We know that to be fact. But I don't think it's fair to compare Asian America, because in their communities, they're still able to thrive and grow and have the support of their community, despite it being a full-on support of Americans, I guess, if that's what she's saying.
Well, no, I think I don't know if you. I just wanted to point out what she said. The one that you just read. She actually said, the Asian woman said that Black women are not at the bottom of anything. They're actually ahead of people. So I don't quite understand what your response is. I'm not understanding. I agree with what she said.
I'm saying that it's not about us being at the bottom. I'm saying that I don't think we can compare where we are with people who've come after us. Is my point. I get what you're saying. I don't think I see what you're saying. We're not at the bottom, but I'm saying that when you think of America, it whether we like it or not, it does become a black-white thing. Yes, we are a melting pot, but it is a black-white, you know, and brown kind of conversation, typically. And so with the base conversation that usually happens, when you see statistics, they talk about white men, white women, black men, black women. There's not a lot of studies that bring Asians in. I'm not saying that they don't deserve the conversation. I'm just saying, based on what the numbers talk about, they don't incorporate Asian Americans anyway. And so I do think it's troublesome.
You know, just so you know that they're definitely included. I mean, you know, when we were on the show, for example, with the you know, like even going right, just real briefly back to the equal pay thing, their numbers are included. Actually, Asian men make actually more than white men on average, but you're talking about 5% of the population, so it's a very small. So it's kind of easier for those numbers to, you know, when you're talking about an even smaller percent of the population. So their numbers are typically included. What I still would say to that sister, and my response to her was, and I respect where the Asian lady is going. I've had an Asian person say that as well, because it's kind of, when you're judging from outside looking in, you kind of see what's done in the media. So I think those examples, while they're beautiful, one mistake that we can make as a people sometimes, and this comes from Kwame Ture, which is, AKA Stokely Carmichael, says, don't confuse the success of a few with the success of many. So I'm even willing to have this conversation with you to say, as much as I may have differences with you, I won't allow that example to trump what you're saying because I refuse to let a successful few be the representation, because the representation, unfortunately, is when you start looking at numbers, which I'm a numbers guy, that unfortunately our sister net worth should not be $5.
Absolutely.
And that's a real number. Like, there's no running from it. You can go look it up, what I'm saying or whatever. And so that's a real issue. So I'm definitely not gonna look at them few when I know the real numbers for the majority of them. So
absolutely.
That's what I say. Go ahead, Queen.
That's definitely a few. That's a good point, Montoya. Samantha says that we as women should still allow a man to be, allow a real man to lead. Sometimes we have to take lead, but believe in women playing, she believes in a woman playing a certain role. If the woman needs to leave for her family to provide, then by all means do so. But women are nurturers by nature, and we should be there for our families to nurture. Allow the man to go out. Times have changed. Women can do almost anything a man can do, but it doesn't mean that we should. We do not have
what's her real name? I like her. What's her name?
We don't have enough men supporting, but we should let those who want to support us do that. Now, because I know I'm going to let Montoya have most of this. I'm just going to say my piece real quick because I know he excited.
Yeah, I like I'll this. Say this is my girl. Who's this? Who is this? Tell me who's saying this.
Look, the beautiful Samantha.
Samantha, that's my girl. That's
exactly why Samantha married, right?
My girl. That's my girl. Let me stop. Go ahead. I like Samantha. That's my girl right there.
Listen, I'll say this, Samantha. For me, it's not about roles. It's not about a woman playing the role of a woman. We talked about this on Friday. Women are nurturers by nature. So that means even in our what do the young people say, in our glow up, right? As we're growing and moving in our greatness, we will always take care of the community. We will always support our men. I'm just saying, when does it happen in reverse? I'm not asking a man to take on the roles of a woman. I'm saying when your woman wants to move in her greatness, do something about it. Every time there's an organization started to support Black men, is usually created by Black women. But there's no Black men out here saying, what are we doing about the crisis of Black women in rape culture? What are we doing about the crisis of Black women being underpaid? What are we doing about the fact that Black women are one of the fastest growing sectors in small business, but we don't have any capital? How many men are jumping up and saying, I'm going to invest into a small Black woman-owned business? That's what I'm saying. I'm saying pour into us, because we're naturally going to pour into you. Like Samantha said, it's in our nature. Just pour a little bit back.
All right, let me talk on this, Queen. So as much as I love what Samantha said, I want to talk about what you just said, and then I'll come back. I pretty much agree with what Samantha said, but here's a couple things. So, and again, I think I gave you this even at the event. We went back and forth a little bit at the event. So again, listen to me and understand that what I am saying is not 100% in disagreement with you, but there's aspects that I, want us to kind of move around. So, like, for example, it's clear, like when you say organization created that's looking out, in a sense for Black men, we think of, like, obviously what comes to mind, and there's been more, but Black Lives Matter obviously being, the most prominent one coming to mind, but that's not the first time that sisters have stepped up to do something of that nature. I just would offer as a small contrast, I say small contrast because I'm not completely contrasting what I'm saying, but I will offer as a small contrast for the organizations that men have started. We literally have started it with Black people in mind, to include you. Like it's so, so it's so because, what I'm saying, because that's how we connected, we're not doing that for us. We're doing, I mean, for us as men only. Like it's not even crossing our mind, because there are organizations well before, whether it be the Black Panthers, whether it be, whatever organizations that we look to historically, they are started with the protection of Black people, because we know as men, we're in this together, not just saying it, not just in voice. Like y'all literally have had to step up as we've slowly decayed from, as I always say, two family homes to more single family homes, right? So this has been a slow decay over the past 40, 50 years. But even before that point, we have so much historical context of sisters stepping up to the plate. Now, here's where I'm willing to concede, and I understand sisters' frustration. So, sexism is a very real thing in America. It's a westernized thing, and it's very commonplace for people that are oppressed to take on the ways of their oppressors. So, I'm willing to admit, have you received some of the back end of the natural sexism that exists in the country? That's not trying to take men off the hook, because what it's led to is why, as I said the other night, why our children don't know a Fannie Lou Hamer, why our children don't know an Ella Baker, why they don't know these prominent sisters who, quote unquote, knew how to play their role even then, but was so prominent in the movement that we applaud, but don't get their credit. I understand that part of them not getting their credit is due to some things that were naturally sexist, naturally chauvinist, that I think I would like to say we're approving upon to a certain extent. But I also would offer that front line for, if we're willing to say that men were men in previous years versus what we're seeing out here now, what I would also offer is some of that front lining was due to the fact that, sister, we don't need you on the front line, in a sense. So because the men are front lining is why you get some of that historical context and know the stories of a Ralph David Abernathy, know the stories of a Martin Luther King, and might not know the story of an Ella Baker. But during those times, when she passes, Andrew Young makes sure they say she was the, Fannie Lou Hamer was the mother of the movement. Like you may not know that, but if you, again, she went to jail just as much as the men. So again, her story should be known. So I'm trying to. It's not just one way. So I want to give credence. Go ahead and jump if you want to jump in.
No, I think you're right, and then I'm gonna read Terry's comment. But you know what I think it is. Please, nobody get me wrong here, because this is not a bashing of Black men message in no shape, form, or fashion. Okay, this is solely, like I said, to speak of. It's my example is, when we say Black Lives Matter, that doesn't mean all lives don't matter. Okay, so when I say women matter and we deserve certain roles and credit, it doesn't mean that we want to take over the roles of men. It doesn't mean that we don't care about men. It doesn't mean that we don't care about our communities. Okay, I'm simply talking about just us as women and us moving in our purpose and our power, not being coming out and trying to fight for the man and being a front line of warriors. That's not what I'm saying. But with that, I think that, like you said, they view her as the mother of the movement. I think when you think about moms and women in those roles, they're so commonly taken advantage of, because we're deemed nurturers. So it's almost like, oh, you're supposed to do that as a woman. You're supposed to be the caregiver. You're supposed to make sure that the community is good. You're supposed to make sure that the family is good. That's what you're supposed to do. Kind of what Samantha was saying, that's our job as women, right? And so it's just carried on to so many different roles that women are not acknowledged for their greatness, because it's just assumed that we're going to do it. But man cook an amazing meal, he gets all the praise and credit in the world. The woman cooks a good meal, it's like, oh, that was good, but you expect her to know how to cook. If she there's so many examples of that there's just this expectation of women. Just like we talked about earlier, if a man gets his kids on the weekend, he's an amazing dad, and everybody should praise him to the mountaintops that he get his kids every Saturday and Sunday. Like, that's a whole heap and lot. But nobody is screaming praises to the woman that takes care of them Monday through Friday. That's just the world that we live in. Terry says, what bothers me, she said, what bothers me is that Black women stick up for anything equal. We are called angry Black women and unappreciative, and most times it's called from our own community. I'm gonna let you tackle that one, Montoya.
So, all right, let's try to do this again. I always use the word nuance. So the nuance of like what you're saying, like I'll say, let me say, which I want to respond to you first, and I'll try to come to her. So the last thing that you said or whatever, you know, as you're saying, you know, the sisters all week, there's no praises for it. Here's the reality in the Black community. Now, I even had this. When I give you this example, you'll see where I'm going. So on mental dialogue, I would quite often put this thing and say, real fathers do this. And I had another brother that breakfully approached, hey, why are you messing around with this real? Because he was the type of father that's handling his business. You know, this is what I'm supposed to do. So don't get real. Matter of fact, it wasn't even directed at me. I actually saw it on Latrice. You know Latrice. I saw it on her page. And I watched the dude break it down. I was like, you know what? I should stop that too. So now I got to post up this morning the beautiful video where his father, you know, has his two girls, and it just says fathers. Like that post made me change that. So I'm using that example. So you're absolutely right that there is a element and a too large element of men getting props because they get their children every weekend. 2 days, every other weekend at that. Let's call it what it is, right?
Right.
Every other weekend at that. Okay. So I know that exists. What also exists is it's not to do a tit for tat, but it's to, when you say this is the world we live in, what's also the world we live in because sisters have stepped up in a major way for a lot of years now. The only praise that goes without, you know, when we see our athletes, not only, but generally speaking, it is the woman, and she deserves it. It's my mother that's been there. If I'm make it to the top, or I'm these athletes, you know what I mean? Like when a brother bigs up their father on that stage, we kind of shocked. Which men, for those who always hurt when the sisters say we ain't there, like I keep telling them, the men that are doing it, don't be personally offended as if what I just said ain't true. Because that's where our dilemma falls off. Like we get torn. For those of us like yourself, Shadon, for those of us who are working through the same thing, working for the same thing, which is us coming together and improving our community, what's happening is, and you say this all the time, we personalize it and miss the bigger point. So again, I'm talking to so like I don't think there's no if anybody tries to argue that we're surprised when one of those athletes says something about their father, like if you try to argue that, you're just taking it way too far. Like, you're not owning what's generally happening in the community.
Absolutely.
You are the type of father who might get that recipient, because there's fathers out here doing. And what happens is when you start making it relative to your circle, I run in the circle of men who are not guilty of a lot of the things that we might suggest. But I have to say to them, like, even though this is our circle, because, you know, me, I look at the numbers all the time. Like, this ain't what's happening in our community because you surround yourself with people like yourself. So I got men who are not falling into any of these categories. And I will say this as well. The idea with answering the sister that just said. So, for example, like, again, the idea of being equal, or when you make that analogy, like Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter, it actually, just so you know, Queen, I personally don't think it resonates for the men who y'all would say this is how we would get more men work. Like if you were to take those categories, because we you know your husband, like you got plenty of men who are doing what they're supposed to do. So, absolutely. So I just want to share with you that analogy doesn't relate in their mind as men. I'm just telling you how we take it. We may be wrong. I'm willing to go that far, but I want you to hear how we're mentally processing it as men, just so you're aware. Absolutely. So when you make that analogy, the men that I'm talking about, who in their mind, they don't feel like they're responding like an all lives matter, because as I've already said, in their mind, everything they're doing for the community, for them is for you as well. like if you remember on the show, the example you gave when I first said this, and I think this is a good nuance. You kind of said, well, yeah, I get that you intend to do that as men. And your response was that I get that you intend to do that. And you said, but to a certain extent, y'all are thinking, when we're talking about pay, you were saying y'all are thinking about getting more pay so you can take care of your woman. And I'm saying, the kind of men I'm talking about, no, we know Black people ain't getting paid the same. And if I'm married to you and you're working, trust and believe, the type of men I'm talking about, they're fighting for you to bring home as much money as we both can make. So they're not thinking, just as long as I get more money to take care of you. Now, it is in our nature. I still would, if we're going to admit some nature, then the part that is our nature is, if we are in a position for you not to work and that's what you want to do, or you know what I'm saying, that's what you want to do, we love that because it is natural to us. And let me go back to your example of going overseas. Here's one aspect of quote unquote having that power to do so. One thing that gets missed in this back and forth is, as you say, y'all are natural nurturers. Well, what's natural, and I'm not saying that all of us are living in our nature because of the cycle we're in. But what is natural for men is, if given that choice of who goes overseas, here's a reality. Because of our nature, it's not conscious, but it is subconsciously emasculating for you to do it if I'm capable. So,
but if you capable versus given the opportunity is two totally different things. And so, like, that's but I totally get what you're saying. And I just want to keep reiterating that the goal is not for the woman to take the place of the man. It's only for us to be able to live in our own greatness. I'll give an example, because my husband is extremely supportive, and I am so grateful that God placed our union together, because he's the exact kind of man that I need so that I can move in my purpose. But I remember having this conversation with this brother that was a relationship therapist or something like that at an event I went to. And we were talking about business, and, I believe in therapy and all that fun stuff. And so I was just kind of talking to him about, the importance of having that dialogue just in a marriage. And he suggested that I wait till my kids were 5 or 6, and I think my daughter was like 1 at the time, before I pursue my dreams in running my business. And I thought to myself, he would never say that to a man. He would never suggest that the man wait until the kids were older for him to move in his dreams. He would absolutely be okay with the man having to be out the house a little bit more often to move in his purpose, to better the community, the family, but most importantly, just for me to be happy as me. Because I believe, and I'm not saying that what I desire is what every woman desires either, because I'm not speaking for all women. What I'm saying is that if a woman can just truly live in her greatness and her happiness and whatever that looks like for her, she would be worth so much more to her family and to her community. But if we're constantly putting women in these boxes and saying that this is what it looks like to be a woman, and this is what you need to do in order to be a woman, and in order to keep a man, you better do this, you better do that, you better do this. I listened to an interview the other day, and this guy was cheating on his wife, and he justified it because he said his wife wasn't doing XYZ. And women were calling in like, well, because she's not doing that, that's why he's doing that. Stop. We have to, I'm not saying just men, I'm saying people need to stop putting all of this burden on the backs of women and giving free shoulders to men to do whatever they want to do, is my point.
Okay, so what I would say to that is, unfortunately, some of what you're saying, in my opinion, disregards when we can't, well, we do now, I think we do it a lot, we disregard nature. Like, there is, like, the issue historically, in my opinion, has been, and especially in Westernized society, is a lack of the proper respect for women. I think that is still an issue. I would even go as far as more of an issue in our community just because of the way things have went. Just the cycle of not having, the masculine and the feminine energy in homes for us to kind of learn naturally the way humans have always learned. Over the last 60 years, the Black Americans specifically have decayed learning it naturally. So I say this to say this. So the example of that coach not saying it to a man, right? So culturally, in my personal opinion, culturally where we are at as a community, and in my opinion, needing more men and women together to raise their children. I push for that all the time. I say it all the time, marriage, before children. And I say it because as I look at the landscape of where we're currently at, which is a situation where I don't think we have enough of that. And so I would have a preference to see marriage become very prominent. And with it becoming prominent, since a woman is a natural nurturer, one thing that I may, like in my personal situation, I don't make, obviously, you're one of my members. I'm trying to put this mental dialogue community together with a whole bunch of side hustles and, figuring out mental dialogue. So I'm not in the ideal situation to even fit what I'm about to say, whatever, and to be honest with you. But what I'm saying is, if it is in my nature, I would take care of you and as much as I could, as much as you want to, and push you to do whatever you want. But ideally, I would like to, ensure you can do exactly what you want because I got it. That's what I would ideally shoot for. So I say all this to say this. So in getting our community better, especially in America, in my personal opinion, when it comes to the Black community, the ideal situation for our children is because of you naturally being the first teacher. I would say to a sister, if I was in a position to do so, if we can have you raise those children in them nurturing years and be close to them especially when I'm out here reading the difference of what it means for these children versus what currently happens in westernized society, where it's normal for both parents to be outside the home and send them to daycare. Like that's normal in westernized society, not the rest of the world. And now that I'm able to research how people are turning out not in this society, I'm actually willing to push and go back towards that. Now, I'm not finna try to make a woman do it. I think we have a bad habit of just trying to tell women what to do. Like, that's no good. Right. I'm willing to own that. But when I'm pushing forward and saying, hey, here's a better model, I think for example, we could agree that this might be a better model for our community. It does not mean that it fits every system. I don't think we do I think we've gotten to a point now where we can't agree on what probably would be a good standard. And we've never done good with making room for the exceptions. That's where we get into it. So there's standards that are better for our community, but now, because we're kind of in a more free-flowing world, we kind of let the exceptions say, well, if we put a standard in place, it's going to keep the exception from thriving.
Right.
And that's the
totally
way
agree.
we can get some agreement here is like, for example, I remember going back and forth. One time I put the marriage before children hashtag up. And I remember a friend of mine watched all the back and forth, and he said, I can't believe that people are arguing against this hashtag.
Right.
And what I had happening with one particular sister, whatever, and she was kind of coming from a strictly feminist viewpoint. And we both kind of know what that is, you know what I mean, to a certain extent. So she was coming from so hard. And one time I just asked her, I said, well, can you even just say that it would be better for more of us to be married? Right. She couldn't even respond to that simple question. Because my point being is, if we could just even agree that it's probably better for more of us to be married than not, and then we say, let's push for that. We can push for that, and for the sister who that's not her role, that's dope. Right. We've never done a good job with that in the past. Like we define women by that. That's what happened historically. And because it happened historically, we have trouble with this conversation right now because we're bringing in the historical context And some people are still doing it. I'm not acting like it doesn't still exist, especially maybe with the older generations where they're still kind of trying to place you in a box. So I get why it feels the way it feels for you, Queen. You know what I mean? Like when I look at you, I just look at you as that box just doesn't fit your done.
Right.
But can we agree, for example, pushing for marriage in a community in which only 28% of our sisters are married and 35% of our men are married, pushing for marriage, for example, can we just agree it's a good thing? But when we say it's a good thing, we can't be mandating that it's for everybody. That's what we fail to have good conversations on this topic, in my opinion.
I agree. And I mean, look, it's rare that I completely agree with you, Montoya, but look, put that one on the calendar, okay? Because
listening to each other. That's what we get. And both of us are getting better at that too. If we can,
we're getting better. But no, I absolutely agree. And I think I'm not gonna read them verbatim because I read them, but I'm gonna give an overview. One queen said that Black women are the most marginalized and disrespected persons on the planet. Nina clarified what she was saying and said that she is British and she recently came to the U.S. and so the history is different for her, and she does understand that Asians have a better connection in their community and that we need to do better as Black people patronizing each other's businesses. A couple different people agreeing and giving thumbs up on different things that we said. Samantha reiterated that she was coming back, that unfortunately that's just kind of the way it is, and though even though we are growing and expanding, we are still viewed as nurturers, and that yes, we should be recognized more, but essentially saying that, and I'm paraphrasing here, Queen, so I want people to go through and read what you're saying, but because I don't want us to be here too late because we can't talk all night. Essentially, you were saying that it's just customary that we're not acknowledged for it, and that Maya Angelou says, "And still I rise," and that we know our greatness, and it's not going to be acknowledged, huh?
Can I address that comment?
Sure.
All right. So here's something I'm gonna let y'all in on a man conversation, right? You know what I mean? Women, y'all have y'all thing. Men, we kind of have our thing. So I want you to hear, especially now that you're hearing, like I've always felt what you're hearing tonight. And we're just doing a good job of, like I say, listening to the nuance of each other, right? Here's something that I've said to plenty of men within mental dialogue and outside the circle. So here's something that I don't appreciate about Westernized society and what I feel comes out of feminism. I'm not saying you're here, but I'm just saying something that comes out. So I, to a certain extent, feel like feminism has almost tricked women into not realizing how there is nothing greater than motherhood. Like when I say nothing greater, I'm talking about, this is what I've said to men. And they agree. So this is something that we easily can agree on, even if they've never heard it. So what happens is, when we say, like, for example, the word equal, like we've always loved what's different about you. That's the natural complement. We complement one another because of how we are different, how men are different, and how you're different. Like the way we treat our boys, we actually like to treat you better, especially if we respect and love you. Again, we know there's issues with respect, but for men who have levels of respect, we love being able to treat you different than we treat our partners, because we love what's so different about you. That's what we love about you. And so what happens is, amongst men, for what's natural to us going out here in the workforce or whatever you want to call it, and men getting noticed for all these accomplishments, but here's the reality. Those accomplishments is all we got. We can't bring life. Like, we cannot bring life. So to Black men who love y'all to death and try not to fit in any of these categories where we're, the ones that are against rape culture. We may not figure out how to organize against it, but we totally against it, right? So for those men that are protectors and feel that way, like for us, it's a reduction for y'all to want to be recognized by y'all accomplishments when y'all could do something that we absolutely could never do. Like, your accomplishments is like, that's cool.
But because we can do...
Go ahead. I'm just saying that's how men look at it. Like, you're reducing yourself to how we measure each other. It's all we got. That's how we see it.
I get what you're saying, Montoya. It's just like what you go back to where we agreed is that everybody is not in that same box. And just because as women we have the ability to give life doesn't mean that it should be a requirement. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a mom, and I know that's not what you're saying, but listen to what I'm saying. I'm not saying that's what you're saying. I'm saying that there is this thought process of some that if women have the ability to give life, that we should be honored by that and that we should do it. And at the end of the day, I know that's not what you're saying, Montoya. I'm just making a point here because we're not all in this cookie cutter box. And at the end of the day, every woman is not nurturing. And every woman should not have custody of their children that do have children.
Right. I hope I made that clear, though, when I say that, though. I hope I made clear.
I know. You are making that clear. I'm just making it clear, additionally, as women, that we have to stop putting ourselves in our own boxes because some women are more leaning, like I've had my godmother, for example, growing up, never desired kids. My aunt never desired kids. She loved living, traveling, doing her thing with her husband. I'm not talking to you specifically, Montoya. This is a live video. We're talking to everybody. And I am saying that as women, we have to respect each other enough to know that we don't all have to get caught in these roles. And every time we talk about being women and caring about women's rights or wanting women to be able to do whatever feels good to them, even if it's taboo, even if it's not the norm, that it shouldn't be a bad word. So like, for example, when you talk about feminist movement, yes, there's extremists in everything, right? There's like there's extremists in Christianity, there's extremists in the Muslim community, and not comparing feminism to a religion, but I'm just saying in any movement there are extremists. So there are some extremists in the feminist movement. That does not make a movement of women wanting to empower other women a bad thing. Just like, for me, I feel like the whole thought about the strong Black woman, which became a negative thing. So we just have to be careful with these labels in general, whether it's feminist, whether it's strong woman, strong Black woman, putting us in a box to say that we're all nurturers. I'm not saying you specifically, Montoya, I'm saying in general. Like, we just have to be careful with putting each other in these boxes and just let women be great. You talk about the conversation amongst men. The conversation amongst women is women judging other women, saying what we should do, what we should not do. If we want to keep our man, we better do this. If we want to get a man, we better say that. If she ain't doing this, her man gonna stray. Like, can we just stop putting each other in a box and saying what it should be? Because each relationship, each woman is different.
See, I think that disregards the idea of creating a standard and making room for the exception. See, I think doing that just lets the standards completely go, because it means, at least in my opinion, because if we're gonna say that generally speaking, these are things that are natural to us, then that's the only way that you can push towards, generally speaking, this would be better for the community than not. But when you take away, when you disregard the nature of things, like, for example, here's a perfect thing that I think is partly something that's detrimental about westernized society. So one thing that I think is very detrimental, for example, is like this idea of the sexual revolution. Like, that came in the 60s. And I think we're living out that real life example of, again, this is where I'm talking about getting into what's natural and what's not. So, for example, with the sexual revolution, I go as far as to say that, like, one time we did a show, and the question on the show was, who won within the sexual revolution? Like, me and my co-host at the time went back and forth on that. And so what I go as far as to say, as in a sense, as the feminist movement, for example, pushes for, well, a woman shouldn't be judged when she does the same thing as a man. I'm not about judging. I don't care nothing about the judgment portion. but I am, in my opinion, realistic about the idea that 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 revolution just makes it easier for men as pursuers to just get some sex. Like since that's what we're all doing, I feel like that's partly what we're living out. I feel like that's what we're living out to the extent for why there needs to be a call for marriage. I think that as a 44-year-old man who's the same age as hip hop, growing up in this hip hop generation, I remember I wrote a piece about we are literally the first quote unquote fatherless generation. What I mean by that is when the numbers switch to more of our community being born without without parents than single parents. We're that generation that started that process. But the generation before us, even though the numbers were going down, they still, generally speaking, most of our community was born to two-parent homes. We're that first generation. So what I go as far as now that, okay, now that we've had 40 years of this, let's evaluate and say, okay, what's good about it and what's bad about it. I think that where we're at as a community and as a culture, financially, culturally, socially, spiritually, when I look at the numbers, because I look at them too much, we lost. So to continue down this path where, again, I am not trying to put everybody in a box, but what I am saying in creating standards, if we say here are some things that are natural to us, for those who are groomed in that, go for it. If that ain't your plight, we don't need to judge like we used to. That's where we're in agreement at. We used to judge that so hard, like a woman couldn't be recognized or defined. You know what I'm saying? So all I'm just simply saying is, if we just say, well, no, that's not. I think we say don't put people in a box when you're still saying, hey, could this be a better standard for our community? I think some of those standards do have to surround around men being taught how to even play the role to get what they want. Like right now, we have men living out adolescent. They're living out extended adolescence, still wanting a woman to do this and do that without looking at that they're not the type of man they need to be. So that makes it harder on sisters too. Like men want traditional stuff, but they've been dependent on their life. That's what they grew up. They was dependent on their mother. So they don't know. They men because they got a penis between their legs, not because they know what manhood entails.
Right.
And I'm having to learn it too. Like I'm single, I'm on it. I'm not married, want to be married, but I know I learned a lot of BS by growing up in this hip hop culture. I learned a lot of BS. Now that I'm, now saying, okay, this is what man, and I'm fortunate. I got to see my grandfather play some of that role. But and watching it, knowing the old times, I'm from the South, so seeing the old times versus new times, the one thing I figured out was, well, if I get lucky enough to do it, I'm gonna be way more respectful than the culture was. My mother had me at 14, so I'm fortunate enough to hear about how it was back in the day when the grandfather's out here with a side woman and that was normal. So I know, I don't, like, as much as I push for marriage, for example, I don't look at 44 years of marriage back in the day as if that alone is a good thing, because we know
because there was a lot of infidelity.
Right. So I'm saying two things here. Like, I don't applaud long marriages just because of that alone.
Just because of the numbers. Right.
So I'm willing to say that, but I'm also saying, well, in trying to recover, when unfortunately, for example, just to say some of the numbers, when I know that we're falling in at 20-something% of our Black youth growing up in poverty, that means 80% of our youth are not.
Right.
So there's a lot of us who are not, but when you find out everybody else at 10% and 5%, you understand what I'm saying? Like, you can't say it's a good number, even though most of us are not. You're saying, whoa, too much of the community is hurting here. And most of that community is hurting because we've lost sight of how to bring these families together. So I would say that in bringing families together, I think it's better for more of us to play to our nature, but you can't disagree if somebody pulls it off differently. Like, maybe people may look at you. Like, I think it's beautiful how you pull this off. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Like you said, your husband is for you, and nobody can't make no judgment of that, in my opinion, even though people will, which is probably your frustration.
Yeah, so let me quickly address Nina again, because Nina said she agreed with you as it relates to the feminist side of it, and that essentially we need to work together and we shouldn't try to take on the role as mid. And she said, "Don't shoot me, queen." And listen, I first of all, I love everybody having their own opinion, queen. So Nina, I adore you, and please continue to chime in and share. I love dialogue, so keep saying your piece. What I'm simply saying is we have to stop taking everything to the extreme. I, by no stretch of the imagination, want to be a man. I, by no stretch of the imagination, not enjoy and adore in amazement the role that I get to play as a mom and as a wife. I have said to so many of my friends how meeting my husband made me want to do things that I never desired to do, to be more submissive, to be more some of the stereotypical things, right, that they say that you're supposed to be as a wife, because I desire to do that because I loved him so much. So I'm not saying that women want to be men. I'm just saying I want to be recognized for my greatness as a woman, period. No strings attached, no connection to what a man is doing. I'm not comparing apples to apples, aside from the fact that I just want to make the same money. I just want to be given the same opportunities. I just want him to fight for my greatness the way I fight for his. That's it. I'm not speaking for women taking over the roles of men. I'm speaking for women being acknowledged and giving the credit for what it is that we do, and the fact that it's not an easy task, and that we should be praised just as much as men are being praised. I don't believe in this whole sexual revolution to sleep with whoever you want to sleep with, but in the same breath, that's just not what's right for me. I'm not here to judge. And if we're going to set standards, then the standards should be both sides. It should be, and I know that's what you're saying, but the standard should be that nobody should be out here just willy-nilly sleeping with any Tom, Dick, and Harry. It shouldn't become a conversation once women say, if men can do it, then I can do it too. And I feel like it only became a conversation when women said we want to sexually be free. But before that, like you said, your grandfather, that generation had side chicks. Side chicks ain't a new thing. Side chicks ain't a millennial thing. Side chicks ain't a rap hip hop culture thing. Side chicks been going on since the beginning of time. And it was okay until women said, okay, you gonna have a side chick? Well, I'm gonna have me some brothers on the side too. Now it's like, oh, wait. We need to set some standards and some rules here. And that's an issue to me. It's not cool. Let everybody be great in their own right. And if that's what if a queen wants to, what they say, soar her royal oats, ain't that what they said on Coming to America? If that's what she want to do, then let the sister do that. She is not less of a queen in my eyes. As long as she's still carrying herself with her crown and she's not ashamed, you're less of a queen when you are ashamed of your own actions, not when somebody else is ashamed of it, because it ain't their life.
Yeah, so I wouldn't. So I don't want to be in a place where we're applauding that. I don't think it's beneficial for the community.
I didn't say I was applauding it. I'm saying that it's a standard across the board. I'm saying the first thing I said, Montoya, is that I don't believe in that. But what I'm saying is, don't make it an issue when women start to do it. It should have always been an issue. We should have always taken issue with people sleeping with multiple people. That should have always been an issue. It should not be an issue once women start to say that they want to do it. Period. Because it's not cool either way.
Right. So, well, I hear what you're saying. I actually, like I said, haven't learned the BS of it. When I said hip hop generation, I was really just talking about the idea of having a bunch of single parent homes or whatever. So I wasn't infidelity. Yeah, obviously that's always been around. So I wasn't saying that started during hip hop. I was just talking about not having marriages. That's been the issue during our generation. Just to get that clarification. And so, in talking to men and pushing marriage before children, that is the standard. You know what I'm saying? That you are also being honorable and respectful and not cheating. Like that is the standard. Here again, which I understand you agree with. Now, going back to the nature of even the sexual thing, like this is where that nature comes from. That plays a role in how it all became a thing when women started doing. There is some nature to this, and so you have to at least give consideration for the nature being this. So men should mature past their nature, but there is a nature simply that's scientific to the science of testosterone versus estrogen, versus how you're built physically and how we're built physically, how your body physically hormonally responds to sex. So what happens is, because that is a reality, is why this has always been a prevalent thing. Like the reality is, people don't, even if you look up early humans, like I don't even think, for example, that monogamy is natural. I think over time, the reason you had nuclear families is because humans came to realize this is especially when they were surviving, when humans were about surviving, they end up seeing this is the better way to reserve our seeds and pass on the generation from a survival standpoint. And so this is why even when you get outside of westernized society, the majority of communities still circle around typically a man and a woman. And so it becomes better that I am just as faithful to you as you are to me. That is still better for wealth, not just financially, culturally, socially. All of those things are done better when I honor this family that I've made a commitment to. So that's why it is and should be the standard. And
but you can't say, so here's my take. And Lily Marie, my daughter's London Marie, Lily Marie, I love it. So she says that the community needs to stop holding it as a standard. Agree. Hold people more responsible for what is right. Stop turning the cheek because it's not your home. That's not affected by the person's actions. Now, and I agree with you, Lily Marie, and here's what I say. I think you can't say we need to hold a standard and then say, but it is in the nature of the man. We have to stop. Wait a minute. We have to stop saying that things are in somebody's nature, because once you say that, it justifies the behavior. And the example that I always give, and I think about, because I have a son and a daughter, so I have to be very mindful of the things that I say and what I allow and the standards that I set around this house. And my husband and I have had these conversations, and that most of the time men are asking their sons at 9, 10, 11 years old, young boys, you got a girlfriend yet? You got a girl you like? You got, have you had, you thinking about sex? Those conversations, and it's okay. But then with their daughters, it's immediately, no, you're not allowed, whatever. And even down to the simplistic part of playing. When I talk about my daughter being, people expecting her to get a doll and nurture her doll and don't drop the baby doll and care for your doll and make sure she's comfortable and all this stuff, when the little boys can take cars and just beat them against the wall and spin their head around. If anybody got a son, boys like to spin around and hit their head. Just don't make no sense. And it's okay. And we have to stop that. Even I saw a study about chores and how little girls are given way more chores around the house than boys are, but the boys still getting allowance for doing nothing. That is not an in your nature thing. It is something that we're constantly teaching and perpetuating these stereotypes as parents, whether that's in our intentions or not. We have the ability to change that, and we have to stop saying it's in the nature, because it does support rape culture by telling our sons it's okay to look at a girl's butt. It's okay to be attracted to this little girl. It's okay to make sexual innuendos or what have you to a little girl that you like. It's okay to try to kiss her. None of that is okay, because if it was okay, we would allow our daughters to do it. So we know that is wrong, but we still push it on our sons and judge our daughters for it. It doesn't make sense.
So let me throw out this real quick. So I remember we were doing, matter of fact, it might have been the Sexual Revolution show that this happened on. I may be wrong about which show it was, right? But we had a caller call in, and again, we had a caller call in who said, so he was telling a story about a woman changing to a man, going through going to the transformation to whatever you call that, right? They switched sex change. They were going through a sex change, whatever. So she was saying that while, you know, as a woman, she always, for example, digests the fact that, you know, men would look back at a woman when she walks by. Like that's just something that just always bothered her as a woman, and thought that was just the rudest thing, you know, that men would ever do, or whatever. But she ended up wanting to go through a sex change and become a man. So what she found was, so before you do the sex change, they start giving you the hormone, like in stages, and you get so many stages, and then you finally have the sex change. Well, before she had the sex change, as she was getting the testosterone exchanges, she literally found she couldn't help herself from doing the very thing she hated men doing when she was getting pumped with all these testosterone hormones. So I get saying stop saying it, but there are some absolutely, if you want to just be like ugly about how vulgar, in a sense, men, not that women, you know, women can be too, but I'm just talking about how vulgar men are naturally. When I say naturally, I'm not talking about excuse it, or I can give you vulgar examples that I would never do. But the aspect that men take, in, like, for example, the way the sex culture is, which is driven by men, and the most negative aspects that are in it are these immature men who are trying to make money, that are acting off their nature in a way that is why women have never created this culture, because it is these, there are certain things. So I know it sounds like an excuse. The reality is the nature exists, and if I have children, I would need to raise my son to be a real man, and knowing, because I will be aware of his adolescent nature. And so I remember at 24, I remember thinking to myself, if I get lucky enough to have children, I'm not gonna raise them with the bullshit I was raised with.
Mm-hmm.
But even in saying I'm not gonna raise them with them, it's not just simply a social construct. I know that at 13, he's waking up with a hard penis and he don't know what that means. And he gonna have it for, you know, for the next 15 years, and he don't know what this
But
means.
just because we don't physically have a genital that extends doesn't mean that little girls aren't having wet dreams as well. Consider that you, a man, experiences waking up with a hard or wet dream, but by 13, a girl is experiencing her menstrual cycle, which is devastating and also connected to her womanhood. So at the same age, we're experiencing things that connect to your manhood and connect to your womanhood. It's just, and they're both connected in a sexual way, because us having our cycle means that now we can bear children. Just the same as you now having your wet dreams mean that you can be a part of producing children. So it's the same. It's just the expectation is different. Once the son has a wet dream and he got his little, you know, person standing at attention, nobody's having that conversation with him about how important it is for him to keep that thing in check, and how he should wait for marriage, and all of these standards that we would love to have. Nobody's having that conversation with their boys.
Right. I want to have that conversation. I'm going to have that conversation. I will tell you, as a man, in having the conversation, there's still a difference in his nature as a having more testosterone and what that means in the pursuit of sex. Like, and they even do the research on how our brains are connected differently as men and women. Like I still must teach him how to mature into that, but I teach him that knowing how he's seeing and thinking about, like, here's a small example, like, get out of the sex part. So this is what I think we could agree on, right? Like, we do understand how men, especially when we're super immature, we are physical in how we want you, right? Women can be physical in how I want you, how you want us, but it's not, for most, in generally speaking, it's not always the number one thing. For boys, it's the number one thing. As we mature, it doesn't stop being number one. We just don't make it as a priority as we mature.
But is it because? But it's not because it may not be because it's not in our nature. It may just be more because we know we're going to be judged for it, which is how we even ended up on this point that women will be judged if they decide they want to walk up to a man and approach him. I'll give an example. I remember an associate of mine, because we knew each other in high school. We were associates, and she was telling me that she saw a guy and she was digging him and she liked him, whatever, and she was kind of stressed out that she didn't have a man at the time, so on and so forth. And so I said to her, if you see a man and you out and about at the club and you like him, approach him. Why miss out on your opportunity if he's there and that's what you want and you're hoping that he can read your mind and know that you want him? And she thought that I was trying to say that she had to go out there and beg for a man, and that's not what I was saying at all. It was simply, if that's what you want, go for it. But the world has said that if a woman approaches what it is that she desires, then somehow she's these negative things. She's she's a slut, she's a this, she's desperate, she's a feminist, she's all of these words that have become bad words just because she knows what she wants. But a woman walks in a nightclub and she sees a man and she thinks she's attracted to him and she go rub him on his back, then she's too much. But it's okay for him to do the same to her. Like that just. And so I say that to say, I think that some women do feel that way, but they have to suppress it. Women have to suppress it because we're told that we're wrong. And we could talk about this all night, but we about 2 hours in. And so maybe we need to do another show like this because we still got folks that are connected and want to talk about it. And I think we missed some of my message. So I'm going to go back and then I'm going to let you say your piece and we're going to come on up out of here. My point has always been, because we went left field, but in a good way, is that I just want women to move in their power. I want Black women to be great. I want people to understand that me wanting to root for every Black woman doesn't mean that I'm not rooting for the Black man, doesn't mean that I'm not rooting for women as a whole, doesn't mean that I hate anybody in particular. It simply means that I just want us to be great, that I just want us to move in our purpose, that I just want us to support each other and empower each other financially, verbally. I don't want women to tell other women that they wrong for feeling a certain kind of way or moving a certain kind of way or doing a certain kind of thing, because we have done an amazing job empowering Black men, empowering our communities, hell, empowering America, because we are the fabric of this nation. It is nothing without us. So if we can do that for an entire nation, Lord knows what it would look like if we just did it for each other. Hell, if you just did it for yourself. That's all I'm saying. So women, root for each other, uplift each other, set the standard. We cannot clearly change the mind of the man because they think that their nature is one thing and our nature is another, but nobody understands a Black woman like a Black woman. Nobody understands a woman like another woman. So let's do better as women, uplifting, empowering each other, not just through words, but through finances. Let's build businesses. Let's change the culture. Let's move away from the me too and make it just me. Okay? That's my piece. What's your piece?
I'm going to keep it short. So I'm still rooting for everybody Black, period, point blank. That's what I think, that's what it needs to be. No, like I don't even respect this new idea. I even hate that I even know what this terms mean, but this man going their own way movement, if you've heard of that BS or whatever, but that's men who are, frustrated with this idea. And it's kind of like the guy asked you after your soapbox, saying, why can't it be us? Excuse me. And I think the man means it as us. Like I don't have a concept of separating it. So when I'm rooting for everybody Black, that is for you as a woman, I don't even know how that anything such, that the separation, I don't see how it's necessary if we are rocking with you. I don't think there's enough of us rocking with you. I think there need to be more men who understand how to, in a sense, fulfill. Again, I like the roles. I think they're decent for creating a better standard for our overall community. So since I push that, I would like to see more men play their role. And the last thing I'll just kind of say about your nature, like, I get that you say, hey, I know that we can't understand, in a sense, how it is to be a Black woman. And all I'm sharing with you when I say this nature thing, I'm just telling you the reality of how we're connected, to the extent that if it's real, it's not just socialization. If that nature is real, we have to, like when I encourage marriage for children, I recognize it and still say manhood is in finding a woman and taking care of a family. Manhood is not in how many notches. We've taken a loss as a community because we've raised our boys to sow their wild oats or whatever. But they're not, it's not I don't think it's just a social construct. I think it is to the nature. So in order to, if I recognize the nature, then I learn how to teach better above that nature, because I do think the nature is real. But that's all I got to say.
Well, I give you that, brother. It was an amazing conversation. Thank you to everybody who's hung in here with us. And look, because it's my life, and I'm gonna have last word, because that's what I do.
Absolutely, you do it. I
I'm
love
gonna
you.
say that just a reminder that self-love is not selfish, and that nobody is saying anything about anybody other than just love yourself. Self-love is not separation. Self-love is not selfish. Self-love is nothing other than what it is. Self-love. If I love me unconditionally, if I fill my cup up with love, then it will naturally overflow onto everybody around me. And that's what I want. I love what Tika said, that we need a class to just teach women how to love on women, because until we learn how to love ourselves, we cannot even set a standard or an expectation of men on how to treat us. We have to set our own standards, our own boundaries, and make it real. Make it real. So I'm a part of making it real. I'm all about the dollar, my ladies. So trust me, I'm working on things to make sure that we can support each other financially, so that we can live in our greatness and whatever your dreams look like. And thank you, Montoya, for joining me for what, 2 hours? It don't even feel like almost 2 hours. Lord, this is just,
I was like, what just happened? But
right.
I agree
This is what happens when you have good conversation.
Yes. That's what's missing from our whole community. Historically, we've been taught not to love ourselves. Everything we're going through is because we subconsciously, even when we think we do, we're chasing a standard that's not our own. Our lack of love for ourselves is why we even have these issues. Right. So I agree with you on love. I want you to love yourself. I'm 100% with you on that, Queen. Love yourself, and then you can love me, and vice versa. I have to love myself to treat you right.
So I'm going to love me. I'm going to teach this little one how to love herself unconditionally. And because she's going to love herself so much, that it is naturally going to attract the desires of a man, because he's like, she loves herself that much. Lord, I need to, something must be great about that queen, that she has that much self-esteem and that much confidence. I need to get with it. Okay. And I need to ride that bandwagon. And I'm okay with
forever. I love you, Queen.
Yes, I love y'all. I love y'all for free. Thank y'all for rocking with us for 2 hours. I promise we'll find a way to come back and have this dialogue, because clearly y'all enjoyed it. But I tell you what, if you are in Atlanta, I can't tell y'all again, and I feel like I'm co-host of Mental Dialogue because I push it so hard, that if you are in Atlanta, and every third Friday is once a month, y'all. You cannot go wrong. You need to connect with this community, because these are the type of conversations that we're having. But you're talking about a room of 30, 40, 50 people who can share ideas, because the thing is to be open to another perspective and another idea so that you can be greater later, so that you can grow into your purpose. So thank you for creating that platform. You guys come out and support the community. But as always, if ain't nobody told you, I love you, I love you, I love you. You are awesome. You are amazing. You are fantastic. You are everything that God intended you to be, right, London? Plus some. We love you for free. Until next time, we out. Peace, my Toya. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mommy.